Hey everybody, Bruce here with Traveling with Bruce. Welcome to my channel today. Today's video is going to talk about the possibility and why there might not be any cruising out of the United States for a couple of years. We may not see cruising start again in the USA until 2022. And why would that be? A lot of factors, and I'm going to try to cover them as best I can here, but man, this is like a chess game here. There is so much going on, and it's all being traced back to what is happening right now at this actual moment in time. Thank you, by the way, for subscribing to my channel, giving my videos thumbs ups, commenting on my videos. Thank you for joining my Facebook group page called Traveling with Bruce, and also following me on Instagram as well. Really appreciate all of that, everyone. All right, let's get into this video here. I have been grappling with this video for the last 6-8 hours, how to talk to you about it. Here's the overview that I see right now, and then I'll try to tell you why cruising might be quite a ways off. Right now, as we speak, cruise lines are aware and do know they will not be sailing for several months right now. Today's date, May the 1st, 2020. Welcome to May Day. Cruise lines knew they wouldn't be cruising back in early March for at least a month. Then they figured out, oh my, we're not going to cruise for at least 2 months. And now they know they're not going to cruise until probably July. Well, that's still, May, June, July. That's 2-3 months away from that. That means a 5-month shutdown. Cruise lines thought at the beginning of this whole pandemic thing that they wouldn't cruise for about a month, but then things would be loosened up and protocols will be put in place, and we'll figure out the new normal. Well, that didn't happen, and it took over a month, almost 2 months, for cruise lines to be able to get the last of their passengers off of their ships. In many cases, the cruise lines could not get passengers to any cruise port, let alone the one they were, emanating from. Cruise started in Miami. You couldn't go back to Miami. Cruise started in LA. You couldn't get back to LA. I mean, it was just crazy. And so cruise lines eventually found ways to get passengers to land and then get them home. But we've heard all kinds of horror stories and travel nightmare stories of passengers getting the virus, having to be quarantined, some on board ships before they could get off ships. Then when they got off ships, they had to be quarantined when they got home, and on and on and on. We've heard story after story. And if you believe the press, you almost figure, wow, if you're a cruise ship passenger, you're guaranteed to get ill. Well, no, that's not the case. The numbers of people who contacted the virus versus not, and those who got really ill versus slightly ill, and then those who perished, the numbers are incredibly low. But, oh my, it makes for a wonderful press release and makes for great headlines and a great way to sell newspapers and try to get clicks on YouTube videos, I guess. In any event, cruise lines have been up against it now since March, and the noose has been getting tighter and tighter around their necks because, like any other business, like an airline, like hotels, like Disneyland and Universal and SeaWorld and other theme parks, movie theaters, Broadway, everything is shut down. You cannot get a paying customer on a cruise ship right now anywhere on the planet, and same with a lot of airlines. They've cut back dramatically, or in the case of Broadway, they've shut down completely, as has Disneyland, Disney World, and so on. And so there are a number of businesses out there who are totally cut off from any form of income, and they have to find ways to survive. Now, if you're an American-based corporation, or if you're a German-based corporation, or UK-based, or whatever, you may or may not have relief, financial help from your government. It all depends on the business you're in and the government in power and the country that you're from. That how deep are the pockets of countries' governments. Here in Canada, where I am, all Canadians can get a $2,000 a month payout if they are of a certain age and looking for work or been laid off or what have you, to kind of make ends meet. Corporations in Canada and the U.S. and other countries have also been able to receive interest-free loans or very low-interest loans, some of which are forgivable, to survive. Cruise lines, however, are not getting that kind of deal. There are some headlines out there saying that Carnival received government bailout help. Not true. The only help Carnival received from any government was when they went to try to raise money from the sale of bonds, which they ended up paying 12% interest on, roughly. The thinking was that the Federal Reserve would stand behind bonds being issued by banks to corporations, and the Federal Reserve hasn't had to do a single guarantee of any government bond, any corporate bond for any corporation, period. But just the mere hint that that might happen helped sell the bonds. Well, great. If you're allowed to raise money at 12% interest when the prime rate is about 2%, some government support that is. Carnival had no choice but to sign the deal, take the money, and have enough cash lying around to survive at least another year. But I would hardly call that government help at all. Anyway, cruise lines are up against it. They have a real problem here. They now know, and they've now known for at least a month, they're not sailing for 4, 5, 6 months. I'm now getting the impression deep inside my soul that there won't be a cruise for the rest of this year or 2020. I don't see a cruise. I don't know if there'll be any cruises out of the United States in 2021. I'll tell you why. Back to the cruise lines, though. They're trying to reduce their costs so they can survive. They have to stop the flow of cash going out of their bank accounts to pay all the crew members they have, all the staff members they have, all the expenses they have, just to be a cruise line ready, willing, and able to take paying passengers at a moment's notice. And so the first thing the cruise lines did, of course, was to get the passengers off the ships. Then they wanted to get unnecessary staff off the ships, out of their head offices. They started cutting pay. They started doing furloughs. Our friends at Royal Caribbean have already laid off 26% of their U.S. staff. Today, Norwegian has announced 20% of their staff are being furloughed. Top executives are taking pay cuts. Now cruise ship crews are being sent home. And here's the problem. The cruise lines have hundreds of cruise ships all around the United States because this is May. There was supposed to be sailing starting in the not-too-distant future to Alaska. There were going to be at least 25 cruise ships going to Alaska. That would have meant 25,000 crew members at a minimum looking after passengers on 25 cruise ships. There's 25,000 crew members who will not be sailing to Alaska. Holland America has already mentioned we're not doing Alaska for 2020, period. So, all those crew members are not needed. At least say 90% of those crew members are not needed. The Caribbean. There hasn't been a sailing to the Caribbean with a paying passenger since February. There won't be any now, till at least the summer or fall. I predict it could go longer. How many ships are we talking about there? 30, 40? Europe. The Mediterranean shut down. The Baltics are shut down. The UK is shut down. There's no need for cruising anywhere in Europe whatsoever. We're talking at least another 100 ships. Now Asia, Australia, New Zealand, it's all shut down. So 500 cruise ships out there. We're talking 500,000 crew not needed. At the moment, there are still 100,000 crew on board these ships that have to be repatriated. The good news is, or the reality is, cruise ship contracts expire. When they expire, cruise members will get hired for a 6-month deal, a 1-year deal, an 11-month deal. They all vary. But at the end of your, contract, you go home for a month or so and rest up, see your family, and then you're offered a new contract to come back. And so in the last 3 months, a whole bunch of contracts have expired naturally with the passage of time. And these people should be repatriated. The problem here is we've got 3 groups of of interest that are at each other, that are conflicting with each other. And it's not personal, it's just the way it is. Number one, we have the crew members on board these cruise ships. Number two group, the owners of the cruise lines, operators of the cruise lines and the ships. And number three, in the U.S., the CDC. And the three right now are having issues. Crew members want to go home. Their contracts are up. They'd like to go home. A bunch of them are on cruise ships now for several months without paying passengers. They're getting a base salary only. They're, of course, given room and board, obviously, but they have no means of additional income. The majority of their income is from tips and gratuities. There's none of that, and so they're really just existing on board the ships, and in more and more cases, crew members are becoming quarantined in a way where they're not allowed to enjoy the amenities of the cruise ship. Don't think that these folks are on a permanent holiday off the coast of Florida. They're being restricted to their cabins. They're being restricted to crew quarters only. They're being restricted to eating in cruise scenarios only. They can't go to the specialty restaurants. Those are all shut down. The pools are all drained. They can't go to the gym to work out. Cruise lines have been shutting things down. There have been more and more cases reported of cases of the virus appearing on these ships. In some cases, some better than others, some worse than others. On the Oasis of the Seas, the big Oasis class ship that Royal Caribbean has, there have been a number of cases of people catching the virus, and a few of the crew members have had to be taken to Fort Lauderdale to be disembarked by ambulance, taken to hospital, and there have been passings. I mean, some crew members have died because of how bad off they are with regard to the virus. It's not like it's a full-blown ship-wide problem, but there are, in some cases, there are reports that entire floors, like the entire third floor, the entire fourth floor, are completely cut off to anyone other than the medical workers because it's a quarantine floor. And there are crew members in isolation, in quarantine, trying to get over the virus. It's pretty bad stuff, and there's no escape. The second party is the CDC. The CDC in the U.S. has made it almost impossible for cruise lines to bring a ship into port and to disembark their crew members. Cruise lines would very much like to bring their ships into port, have buses waiting for their crew. As soon as they clear customs and immigration, they can then board the bus, be taken to the airport, and be flown home to wherever they come from, whether it's to Asia, whether it's throughout North America, to Europe, South America, it doesn't matter. The problem is the CDC will not allow a cruise ship to bring any passengers into port unless the cruise line has pre-cleared with the CDC and the port authorities that whatever crew members get off the ship are going to be transported to, say, an airport in a private setting, which would be a chartered bus, no problem there. And when they get to the airport, within 4 hours, they are on a chartered private plane only to be flown home directly without connections at the cost of the cruise line. And once they're there, once they get to where they're going, they've been pre-cleared to arrive into said country, whatever that country is, and then that country can handle those people from there. Problem here is that a cruise ship comes in with 800 crew members from 80 different countries. We're talking in some cases 10 people from this country, 5 from that country, 30 from that country. In other words, you don't have enough people in a single group to even organize an aircraft that could hold, say, 200 passengers, 200 paying passengers. You're talking about aircraft that can hold 10 or 20 people. We're talking about private jets now. You want to take a private jet from Miami to Toronto, Ontario for 8 employees. You're looking at $4,000 an employee, $5,000 per employee. This is extremely expensive. A commercial flight, if there were one available, would be $300-400 per employee. If the employees are Europe-based, but you've got, say, 100 European employees, but they're not all ending up at the same airport, they have to have connections, CDC won't let the first flight even start. And so you can't fly everyone to London or to Hamburg or Frankfurt and disperse them out on secondary flights. CDC won't allow it. And so it's become an issue. Of course, flights to the Philippines, to India, to Indonesia are virtually impossible. It would not be uncommon for a cruise line to fly 5 crew members from Miami to Heathrow, and then from Heathrow to the Philippines or to Hong Kong or to South Korea to get them home. But with the CDC insisting that the flights have to be charter and non-connecting, it's impossible. It can't be done. So the cruise lines are stuck. The CDC has insisted that the cruise lines sign a contract with them that guarantees all crew members will be repatriated at cruise line expense, all private services, no public transportation whatsoever. And they have to cover any and all incidentals, including if a passenger, one of these crew members, gets a temperature halfway home and has to be isolated. It's all at the expense of the cruise line. The cruise line is saying, look, we've had these people quarantined offshore for weeks as per your instructions. They're coming onto the pier here in Miami or Fort Lauderdale or Los Angeles. They have no temperature. They have no symptoms. We've adhered to all of your rules, and now you want us to sign a new blank check deal for every crew member, 100,000 of which we have. We just can't be at that kind of risk. I mean, it's just limitless risk to us. It could totally bankrupt us. CDC says tough. Too bad, can't come into the States. What has that meant for crew members? They're trapped. They're trapped on board ships where their employer wants them to go home. They want to go home. The CDC won't play ball to allow it unless severe, really tough rules are in place. The crew members are stuck on board these ships. And so what have the cruise lines done to counteract it? They have done what the Carnival just did the other day. They've gathered up 18 of their ships in the Bahamas in calm waters and are now literally using their lifeboats or tenders to tender passengers, crew members, between ships. 9 Carnival ships will be sent to various areas in the world with up to 1,000 crew members or more per ship that will be disembarked from 18 ships to 9, and these 9 will sail off with the crew. To get crew home, they have to sail their own crew back to their home countries. It's the only way to do it. It's time-consuming. It's costly. But there's no other way to go. And for Carnival, they're looking at the situation saying, if we don't do this, we have to house and feed these people on board our ships for 30, 60, 90, 120, 180 more days. How much longer is this going to last? And it's an endless drain of cash out of the pocketbook of every cruise line. This is not a Carnival issue only. It's Royal Caribbean, it's Norwegian, it's everyone else. And so even the small boutique 6-star cruise lines are doing exactly the same thing. They are rendezvousing their ships in various countries around the world, transferring crew from 3 ships to 1 or between 3 ships. They're doing crew swaps, and then they're getting their crews home to various areas around the globe. And the CDC is hard fast on their end of the deal. The cruise line operators are looking at it going, we're in a no-win situation here in the United States. We can't get anyone home. We can't get Americans home because we have some Americans who live in Illinois. The ship that they're on is in Florida, off the coast of Florida. We bring the ship into Miami, and we can't get the Illinois American resident off our ship because the CDC says you either fly them home on a chartered flight or you drive them home in a private entity for hire without stops. Well, Illinois is a 2-day drive from Miami. You can't do it in one go. You want to take a private jet for an employee. You're talking $10,000 to send home an employee to Illinois. What is going to happen to Americans who are stuck on board these cruise ships? I'll tell you what's happening. The cruise lines are sailing them to different countries. They're going to sail them to Mexico. They're going to sail them to the Bahamas, and they'll disembark them there if they can. They're going to try to arrange a disembarkment for these people in a country that will accept them, and they'll put them into 2 weeks quarantine in a hotel in, say, Nassau, Freeport, Ensenada, Mexico, somewhere. And then they're going to try to get them home from there on a commercial flight, if at all possible, because they're no longer on a cruise ship after 2 weeks in quarantine. It is absolutely asinine, ridiculous, and unfair to the crew members who have now been stuck, in some cases, for over 6 weeks in rooms as prisoners. They are not allowed to freely roam the ship. They're only allowed out of their room an hour or two a day. And for mealtime, they are cut off. It's unbelievable. Now, let me talk to you about why there might not be cruising in the United States until 2022. Would you, as a crew member, be willing to become employed by a cruise line? Knowing that the possibility of you, A, being able to fly into the U.S. to start your contract is highly restricted. B, when your contract is up, you may or may not be able to get out. C, you're on board a cruise ship from, say, Miami to the Caribbean and back for a 1-week cruise, and during that 1 week, one passenger or one crew member of yours gets the flu-like symptoms, and the entire ship is on a 14-day quarantine off the coast of Florida. And even then, the CDC has restrictions on how people can get off. You want to be a crew member in that scenario? Why would you take a job under those conditions? Because you may find that that ship, after offloading those passengers, might be forbidden for who knows how long to take new passengers on. And in other words, the ship is floating off the coast of Florida again for a month or two at a time before it is even allowed to take on a new passenger. Why? Because they're looking for another passenger or crew member to get ill. And it's inevitable if everyone is stuck inside a ship and can't get fresh air and go about their business. Maybe someone else gets the virus or not. I don't know. Without a vaccine, I have no idea. There won't be a vaccine in 2020. I don't see a vaccine for most of 2021. As fast as they're going. These take 2 years to develop. And without a vaccine in place, the CDC may not allow passengers on cruise ships, let alone crew members, to even get on cruise ships through U.S. ports, which means, of course, San Juan, Puerto Rico, St. Thomas in the Caribbean, Guam, and any other U.S. areas like Hawaii, Alaska, and on it goes. And if a third of the world's cruising population cannot get on a cruise ship through U.S. ports or through U.S. territories, cruise lines are going to avoid the U.S. altogether. Of course, if you're an American and you want to go on a cruise, and a cruise is departing from, say, Rome in 2021, you fly to Europe, if they have flights. You get there, you get on the ship, if you can do it. You take your 1 week Mediterranean cruise, and you come back to the U.S. Are you now going to be put into a 2 week quarantine? Because the CDC is still deciding that anyone on a cruise ship anywhere in the globe coming back to the U.S. is automatically in a 2 week quarantine scenario. This is just not going to work. Americans are going to be effectively shut out of the cruise world until the CDC and the cruise lines can come to an agreement. At this point, there is no movement from the CDC. The cruise lines are hoping to be back sailing at the end of June into July. I don't see it happening. I am one that the cruise lines may not be able to staff their ships properly. Their requirements to put new medical facilities in place on the cruise ships will be so onerous and expensive and costly that they're going to have to add $1,000 a cruise to each passenger just to handle it, because it's an absolute blank check medical coverage scenario once you set foot on board that ship. And on the one hand, you might feel great. Oh yeah, hey, as a passenger, I'm happy because if I get ill, I'm going to be looked after. On the other hand, the cruise line's going, yeah, we have 3,000 passengers here that could cost us millions and millions of dollars in healthcare costs if they get ill on this ship. We can't take the chance. And no insurance company is going to underwrite this because we're dealing with a pandemic scenario. And this is where cruising might be totally shut down until 2022. And that's assuming there will be a vaccine created in the first place. I just don't know how this is going to play out. Anyway, folks, I hate to be the bearer of such negative news, but this is what I'm reading between the lines day after day, week after week about. The press, of course, believes the cruise ships started everything, are responsible for everything bad. First it was cruise ships are the biggest polluters in the world, and they're responsible for the heating up of the planet. And now, of course, cruise ships are being blamed for the virus. After all, without cruise ships, there wouldn't be a virus. I mean, this is also all bunk, but, press, like water, it flows to the lowest point wherever it's easiest to flow to. And right now, it's easy to pick on this industry. I'm not trying to defend the industry, but on the other hand, trying to cut it an even break. They're in a no-win situation right now. You could say the same for the CDC in a way, because right now in the U.S., there are over 1 million people with the virus, and over 60,000 have passed away. And then there are the crew, the innocent. They've done nothing wrong. They've done everything they're supposed to do. They're adhering to their employer's rules and regulations, and they're stuck on ships 10, 20 miles off the coast of the United States and other countries, and they cannot get home, and they've done nothing wrong. Anyway, we'll stay on top of the story. Thank you for joining me today. Stay warm, stay safe, stay healthy. We'll talk to you later, everybody. Bye for now.